The music revolution in the 60s didn't happen by accident. It began with three bands who started as teenagers with big dreams. Let's rewind to where it all began. The Beatles. In the smoky clubs of Hamburg, Germany, four young lads from Liverpool, John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison and Ringo Starr, played marathon sets night after night. They weren't yet the polished icons we know, they were hungry. Back then, they shared a single cramped room, slept in bunk beds, and played for beer and hot meals. By 1962, after countless rejections, producer George Martin took a chance on them. The rest? Well, that's history. The Rolling Stones. Meanwhile, in London, Mick Jagger and Keith Richards bonded over a mutual love for American blues records. Their early gigs were raw, sweaty affairs in dimly lit pubs. Brian Jones, the band's original leader, named them after Muddy Waters' song Rollin' Stone. But their big break came when a Decca Records executive, the same one who infamously passed on the Beatles, signed them. Their early image? Dirty, dangerous, and everything parents hated. The Beach Boys. Across the Atlantic, in sunny California, the Wilson brothers, Brian, Dennis, and Carl, along with cousin Mike Love and friend Al Jardine, were crafting harmonies inspired by Chuck Berry and the Four Freshmen. Their first hit, Surfin', was recorded for $300. No one expected it to blow up, but it captured the carefree spirit of West Coast youth. While the Beatles were playing in German basements, the Beach Boys were singing about sun, sand, and convertibles. As the 60s unfolded, these bands didn't just follow trends, they invented them. Here's how their sounds evolved. The Beatles. In 1964, the Beatles were all matching suits and bouncy pop. But by Rubber Soul, 1965, they traded Yeah 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 for introspective lyrics and sitars. Then came Sgt. Pepper, a psychedelic masterpiece recorded over 700 hours in the studio. Lennon once said, "We were just trying to outdo ourselves." And they did. Helter Skelter, 1968, practically invented heavy metal. The Rolling Stones. The Stones started as blues purists, covering Howlin' Wolf and Muddy Waters. But after Satisfaction, 1965, they embraced rock's darker side. By Sympathy for the Devil, 1968, they were mixing voodoo rhythms with political chaos. Critics called it the sound of rebellion. Keith Richards later joked, "We weren't trying to scare people, but it helped." The Beach Boys. Brian Wilson's genius turned surf pop into high art. Pet Sounds, 1966, used bicycle bells, dog whistles, and a full orchestra. The Beatles called it their biggest inspiration. But behind the scenes, Brian's obsession with perfection led to Smile, an album so ambitious it collapsed under its own weight. The unreleased tapes became music's most famous what if. These weren't just albums, they were cultural earthquakes. Let's break them down. The Beatles' Abbey Road, 1969. Side 2's medley, from You Never Give Me Your Money to the end, was stitched together like a symphony. McCartney's bass line on Come Together? Pure magic. Fun fact, the cover photo caused endless conspiracy theories about Paul's death. The Stones' Let It Bleed, 1969. Released the same year as Altamont's disastrous concert, this album was a grim prophecy. Gimme Shelter featured Mary Clayton's chilling vocals, so powerful she miscarried after the session. Keith Richards called it the apocalypse set to music. The Beach Boys' Pet Sounds, 1966. God Only Knows was so radical, radio stations refused to play it. God, in a song was taboo. Brian Wilson recorded it in 23 takes. Decades later, it's ranked among the greatest songs ever written. Music wasn't just entertainment in the 60s, it was a weapon of change. These bands didn't just soundtrack the era, they rewrote the rules of culture itself. The Beatles. When the Beatles landed in America in 1964, they didn't just bring music, they brought a revolution. Teenagers screamed so loudly, their concerts were drowned out. Parents panicked over their long hair. And when John Lennon claimed the Beatles were more popular than Jesus, churches held record burnings. But beyond the chaos, they pushed boundaries. All You Need Is Love became the anthem of the summer of love, and their embrace of Indian spirituality introduced the West to meditation. Even the CIA took notice. Declassified files show they monitored Lennon for his anti-war activism. The Rolling Stones. If the Beatles were the princes of peace, the Stones were the court jesters of chaos. Their 1969 Altamont concert, meant to be a Woodstock West, ended in a murder, captured on film. The grim irony? They just released Sympathy for the Devil. Yet, their rebellion resonated. Fashion copied Jagger's androgynous flair, and their Street Fighting Man became a protest hymn. Keith Richards' riff on I Can't Get No Satisfaction was so iconic, NASA transmitted it to astronauts in space. The Beach Boys. The Beach Boys sold sunshine, but their legacy was deeper. Pet Sounds inspired Sgt. Pepper. Paul McCartney called Brian Wilson the Mozart of rock. Yet, their wholesome image hid turmoil. Dennis Wilson was the only Beach Boy who actually surfed, and the only one who befriended Charles Manson. Their 1966 tour was cancelled when Brian refused to leave his bed, battling mental health demons. Still, their harmonies defined California's mythos, even if the dream was fraying at the edges. Behind the music were real people with different personalities. Let's peel through them. The Beatles. John was the wit, Paul the charmer, George the mystic, and Ringo the everyman. Early on, they wore matching suits and grinned for cameras. But by 1967, Lennon traded clean-cut for granny glasses and LSD, McCartney became the avant-garde dandy, and Harrison vanished into Indian ashrams. Their final photo shoot, atop Apple Corps' roof in 1969, showed four men who'd outgrown each other, but not their legend. The Rolling Stones. Jagger strutted like a rooster, Richards lurked like a pirate. Brian Jones, the original leader, drowned in drugs and fame, fired in 1969, dead weeks later. Their image? Manufactured rebellion. A 1967 arrest for drugs made headlines, but Richards later admitted, "We were just kids playing at being outlaws." By decade's end, they leaned into it. "We're the world's greatest rock and roll band," became their mantra. The Beach Boys. Mike Love was the showman, Dennis the wild child, Carl the peacekeeper. But Brian? A reclusive genius who heard symphonies in his head. His breakdowns were whispered about, like the time he recorded Vegetables while lying in a sandbox. Their image as surf kings was a facade. Brian hated the beach. "I just like the chords," he shrugged. The Beatles. Their 1965 Shea Stadium show was pandemonium. 56,000 fans, no monitors, no one hearing a note. By 1966, they quit touring. "We're just human jukeboxes," Lennon complained. Their final rooftop concert in 1969 was raw, joyous, and the last time they played live together. The Rolling Stones. The Stones thrived in chaos. At Altamont, Hell's Angels, security, beat fans as Jagger sang Under My Thumb. Yet their 1969 tour redefined rock shows, pyrotechnics, giant inflatable phalluses, and Jagger's hypnotic strut. Critics called it rock as theater. The Beach Boys. Early shows were slick surf spectacles. But without Brian, they floundered. A 1967 European tour was cancelled after Mike Love yelled at crowds for sitting quietly. By 1970, they were playing state fairs, a far cry from Pet Sounds. Fame came at a price. Some paid in cash, others in other ways. The Beatles. Yoko Ono's presence in the studio fractured the band. McCartney sued to dissolve their partnership in 1970. Lennon later admitted, "We killed each other to survive." The Rolling Stones. Drug busts, paternity suits, Jones' death. Their 60s ended in courtrooms. Richards' blood was famously replaced to pass heroin tests. The Beach Boys. Brian's mental health spiraled. Dennis joined Manson's cult. By 1969, their label rejected Smile as unlistenable. Carl Wilson carried the band until he couldn't. The Beatles. Solo careers, anthology reunions, holograms in Vegas. McCartney's 2023 Glastonbury set proved their songs are eternal. The Rolling Stones. Still touring in 2024. Richards joked, "I'll outlive cockroaches." Jagger's strut inspired Prince, Bowie, and every frontman since. The Beach Boys. Kokomo revived them in 1988. Brian's Smile finally released in 2004 to rave reviews. The dream never died. So, who truly ruled the 60s? Was it the Beatles, the innovators who changed music forever? The Rolling Stones, the rebels who gave rock its dangerous edge? Or the Beach Boys, the tortured geniuses who turned pop into art? These bands didn't just make music, they changed the world. And their legacy? It's still playing on your radio, in your playlists, in every band that dares to dream louder. Now it's your turn. Drop a comment below. Beatles, Stones, or Beach Boys? Who gets your vote? Hit like if you're obsessed with contents like this, and subscribe because this is just the beginning. We've got more deep dives coming and you don't want to miss what happens next.